The Frost Warden, the theme that has everyone so excited this update. Update 36 is a patch that would bring some class identity to the Warden, and it's happened. With this, I've created the ultimate Frost Warden. This build can be used in everything, from going through the hardest solo content with ease and group content without changing a thing, and all of course with no trial gear. The Frost Warden has always been a popular theme for Magicka users. When Brittle was first introduced, it became a staple of endgame raid groups, and with the recent love it's received, it's now a must try. For this build, I set myself a goal. I wanted to use as much frost as possible while still maintaining the things I like in a solo build. Enough mitigation and self-healing, self-sustaining, high damage, and of course as easy as possible to use with no trial gear. So in this video, we're going to go over everything you need to use and understand the magic of Frost Warden, including race, attributes, Mundus, consumables, gear, skills, champion points, and of course at the end I'll go over and explain everything you need to get the most out of this Frost Warden of ours and how to understand the build and make it work for you. For race, I'm going to list the choices of what I think are the best for this build and then explain why. First Dark Elf, then Khajiit, followed by High Elf, and last Breton. Dark Elf has some great bonuses to weapon and spell damage, but also has bonuses to max Magicka and max stamina. Being high in damage output, but still keeping bonuses for stam works so well for this build. Khajiit has some of the best stats for a solo race, increasing health, stamina, and Magicka recovery, also increasing maximum health, Magicka, and stamina pools, and on top of that, it increases critical damage and critical healing by 12%. While High Elf technically has the most damage in front of the Dark Elf, that difference is less than 1%. Specializing in Magicka, it has bonuses to max mag and weapon and spell damage. It also has the ability to restore Magicka or stamina based on whichever is lowest. You also take 5% less damage when using any ability with a cast time or channel. But because of its lack of bonuses in other ways and just specializing in Magicka, that ranks it at about 3 in my opinion. And last we have Breton. The Breton is the king of Magicka Sustained, and a great choice for those players looking for something super easy, increasing max Magicka, spell resistance, and mag recovery, and it reduces the cost of Magicka abilities by 7%. But all that being said, race only matters when you're min-maxing or pushing endgame content, so please by all means choose whatever you like, it will still be fine. Attributes and Mundus. For this build, we're leaning into our frost and magic damage. This means we're going all 64 points into Magicka. And for our Mundus, we'll be going with the Thief, which increases our spell critical chance. For consumables, starting off with our food, Ghastly Eyeball. This is a very cheap food that we can start using from level 1 onwards. You can buy a Ghastly Eyeball recipe from a guild trader for very cheap. Or if you don't want to make it yourself, you can always just buy stacks of the food itself for very cheap. Onto potions. Our first choice for potions is going to be Essence of Spell Power, granting us 3 major buffs that will help us a lot. First, Major Sorcery, increasing our spell damage by 20%, Major Prophecy, increasing our spell critical chance, and Major Intellect, which increases our Magicka recovery by 30%. Because these potions are pricey at times, while you're running around doing easier content, I recommend using Tri-Stat pots, or even just trash Magicka potions will do fine. Save the good stuff for the harder stuff, solo arenas, dungeons, or even trials. To make Essence of Spell Power pots yourself, you'll want to combine Cornflower, Lady Smock, and Water Hyacinth with some Lorcan's Tears. Also, remember to take the passive from the alchemy tree called Medicinal Use. This passive increases our potion effects by 30%, which will extend our uptime on buffs and allow us to maintain 100% uptime on them. Diving into gear, there is no set like Frostbite when it comes to a frost build. This set will be the core of this build, going on our body in all divines. It will be giving us weapon and spell damage, crit chance, more weapon and spell damage, and for the 5th bonus, it increases our damage done with frost abilities by 8%. It also increases our damage done against chilled enemies by 4% and increases our damage done against enemies that have Minor Brittle by another 2%. Here's the thing with this build and setup. There's almost no time that enemies are not chilled, which in turn means they will almost always have Minor Brittle. I'll explain that a little bit later. But what this means is that we can add this together, meaning 8% for frost only abilities and another 6% for all abilities. Following this, we'll be using another monster set on this build. I quite like monster sets. I find them easier to obtain than mythics, and in this case, this one is available in the base game. For frost damage, there's nothing like Ice Heart. Dropping out a Direfrost Keep, well, one piece light, 1 piece medium, both in divines. The 1 piece gives us critical chance, and the 2 piece, when you deal critical damage, you have a 20% chance to gain a 5k damage shield, and while that holds, you deal frost damage to all enemies within a 5-meter radius of you every second. This can happen every 6 seconds. This means that we can keep really good uptimes on a damage shield as well as do really good AoE frost damage. On our front bar, we'll be going with the Master's Frost Staff. This one drops out of Dragonstar Arena in Craglorn. This set is a must. You don't need the perfected version, but if you can get it through Veteran with some friends, I highly recommend it. We'll be putting this set in the precise trait to increase our critical chance, with a frost damage enchantment, just because, you know, Frost Warden. If you have the perfected, you will get bonus weapon and spell damage, but the main thing it does is it reduces the cost of destructive touch by 10% and increases your weapon and spell damage by 600 for 4 seconds after activating it. In this build, we'll be taking full advantage of this. I'll explain a little bit later. And now for our back bar set, this one was tough. There are a lot of options. For this particular build, we're going to go with, that's right, you guessed it, Pillar of Nirn. However, I will list some others in case you would like them. Here's the thing, Pillar is a proc set. What that means is we can put it on the back bar and carry on like normal, and it will just keep working. It's a set and forget and hits like a truck. I was worried at first and not going to slot it. I was worried because its animation is a rock coming out of the ground, and I thought it might be molten-like. Turns out it's not, and under all of our ice effects, it looks extremely satisfying when it procs. What does this mean? This means that we want to slot this on the back bar and the jewelry. The back bar will be a frost staff with the infused trait and a weapon damage glyph on it, and the jewels will be either bloodthirsty or infused with spell damage glyphs on them. The choice is yours. Pillar of Nirn gives us max stamina, this is important, crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and for the 5th piece, when you deal damage, you create a fissure underneath the enemy for 1 second, dealing bleed damage to all enemies within a 2.5 meter radius and causing them to bleed. This can happen every 10 seconds, allowing us to get 100% uptime. In my testing, this one stood out as about a 15% damage increase over others. However, I know some of you out there might be interested in a frost only build, which I understand. You can do this for sure, however, you'll lose quite a bit of damage. I'm going to list 2 sets that I think could be great contenders for frost only builds. First, Icy Conjurer. This is a proc set that can be backbarred, giving max mag, weapon and spell damage, offensive penetration, and the 5th piece, when applying a minor debuff to your enemy, it summons a non-reflectable ice wraith that will charge your enemy, dealing frost damage over 10 seconds. Just like Pillar, this one can happen every 10 seconds, allowing 100% uptimes. Second is Winterborn. Another proc set when we deal frost damage, you summon an ice pillar that deals frost damage to all enemies in a 3 meter radius. The ice pillar persists for 2 seconds and reduces the movement speed of all enemies in this radius by 50% and can occur every 6 seconds, leaving okay uptimes. There are of course others, but in my opinion, these are the easiest to just swap Pillar out for because they're proc sets as well. Moving on to our skills. Again, leaning into that frost theme, we've gone with some interesting choices. Starting off with our front bar. First we have Deceptive Predator from the Animal Companion skill line. I've chosen this morph because I found the minor evasion buff, which reduces our damage from area attacks by 10%, more beneficial than the other morph. Also, when we activate this, it flaps some really cool wings and gives us major expedition for 6 seconds, which is just so much fun. Next, Blue Betty, also from the Animal Companion skill line. When we summon this, it restores magicka to us over 25 seconds, and it grants major sorcery, which increases our weapon and spell damage by 20%. We do already get this buff from our potions, however, the sustain is really nice as well. If you're just doing easier content, you've got that buff without using the expensive pots. Every 5 seconds though, this thing also removes a negative effect from you, so this is a must-have for solo builds in my opinion. Our next skill, which is our spammable Destructive Reach, or also known as Frost Reach. Coming from the Destruction Staff skill line, this pairs with our Master's Ice Staff. It also deals frost damage and more frost damage over 20 seconds. Also, enemies hit by the initial effect are afflicted with the chilled status effect, and this is important because of the brittle debuff, and I'll explain why at the end of the video if you're looking for an explanation of how brittle works. In our 4th slot, we have Subterranean Assault from the Animal Companion skill line, otherwise known as Shulks. This one I went back and forth on. This is the stamina morph for this one. So here's the thing, the magicka version has such weird timing that short of using a tracker for it, it just didn't feel right. So we went with the stamina morph, which is also going to help us with our sustain. This thing is big damage. After 3 seconds, they deal poison damage to enemies in front of you. After that, 3 seconds later, they'll pop up again and deal more poison damage to enemies in front of you. Our 5th skill, Arctic Blast, from the Winter's Embrace skill line, is our big burst heal, huge AoE damage, and a CC. A CC means crowd control, effectively stunning a bunch of things in an area. This skill is going to give us a giant burst heal, and then for 20 seconds after, chill our foes to the bone, stunning them immediately for 3 seconds upon activation and dealing frost damage every 2 seconds. The damage also has a higher chance to apply the chill status effect. Again, this is important for later. Our front bar ultimate is going to be Flawless Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild skill line. This This is here because of the Fighter's Guild passives. Slayer, which gives weapon and spell damage for each Fighter's Guild ability slotted, and Banish the Wicked, which generates ultimate whenever you kill an enemy. We'll be using our backbar ultimate primarily for damage, and we'll see why soon. Speaking of our backbar, let's start with Unstable Wall of Frost from the Destruction Staff skill line. This thing does a lot. First, it creates an icy barrier dealing frost damage to enemies in the area and applies a frost shield for 6 seconds to you and nearby allies that absorbs almost 5k from projectiles. Also, chilled enemies become immobilized for 4 seconds. That's not all. It also explodes when the effect ends, dealing frost damage and applying another frost shield that absorbs projectiles. Next, Winter's Revenge, coming from the Winter's Embrace skill line. This one is our big AoE damage, conjuring icy shards at the target location, dealing frost damage for 12 seconds. The damage of this is increased by 30% if cast with the Destruction Staff equipped. On top of that, enemies are overcome with Bitter Cold, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. And the ability has a higher chance to apply the chilled status effect. Man, this chilled status keeps coming up, huh? Don't worry, I'll explain it all at the end. Moving on to our third skill on the back bar, Channeled Acceleration. This one can be found in the Psijic skill line. This is our source of minor force, increasing our critical damage done by 10% and giving us major expedition for 12 seconds. This thing lasts for a full 60 seconds. Our fourth skill was tough. I went back and forth on a lot of options and tested a lot of things, but finally I settled on Razor Caltrops. This one can be found in the Assault skill line, making this a PvP skill. I didn't want to include a PvP skill, however, this one was too good to not use. It throws down a ball of Caltrops that scatter over 8 meters, dealing damage every second for 10 seconds. It also reduces their movement speed by 50%, and on top of that, and why it's here, is it applies Major Breach to any enemy in the area, reducing their physical and spell resistance by almost 6k. We don't have a lot of pen, so this is a must-have. At the end of the skills, I'll give another option if you really just don't want a PvP. Our fifth skill, Ice Fortress. From the Winter's Revenge skill line, this gives us Major Resolve, which increases our physical and spell resistance by almost 6k. It also gives us Minor Protection, reducing our damage taken by 5% for 28 seconds. And last but not least, our backbar ultimate. Sticking with the ice theme, we're going with Ice Comet from the Mage's Guild skill line. This one is so much fun to use, calling down a comet from the constellations to blast an enemy, dealing huge frost damage in a 5-meter area, knocking them down, stunning them for 2 seconds, and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. After that, the target area continues to do big frost damage every second for 13 seconds. I couldn't pass this up on a frost build. Now, for some other alternatives. Firstly, if you don't want to go and get Caltrops, which I understand, you can use Elemental Susceptibility from the Destruction Staff skill line. This only applies to one target, however, so in solo content, I found this one really tough and could only apply it to the things that really mattered. It's a placeholder, however, until you can get Caltrops. Next, if you didn't want to run this ultimate combination, I would highly recommend the Guardian ultimate from the Animal Companion skill line, aka the Bear. This would need to be double barred and does not do frost damage though. There's a lot of combinations you can try, and to be honest, I could sit here and talk all day about the things you could swap out, but after so much testing, I found this to be the best combination of skills for a Frost Warden. Now, champion points. Let's start out with the blue tree. Our first choice will be Wrathful Strikes, which increases our weapon and spell damage to our damaging abilities. Next, we want Fighting Finesse. This increases our critical damage and critical healing. After that, we went with Master at Arms, increasing our direct damage. And finally, I found Reaving Blows to be the best fourth choice. This thing works similar to the Pale Order Mythic. It heals us for 7% of the direct damage done. This means that we are just passively healing while doing damage and allowing us to not have to spam our self-heal. Now, for our red tree, I find this the best combination for solo builds. Starting with Balanced Vitality, increasing our max health, Fortified, increasing our armor, and Rejuvenation, which increases our health, magicka, and stamina recovery. Now, the fourth slot is always a flex. My recommendation is Slippery for newer players, which breaks us free when stunned automatically at no cost every 21 seconds. After that, other really good choices I like is Siphoning Spells, restoring magicka whenever you kill an enemy, Expert Evasion, giving us a free roll dodge every 30 seconds, or even Celerity, increasing our movement speed. The choice is yours, to be honest. Use whatever feels best for you. Now, what makes this build and how does it all come together? Let's start with the obvious bit. Why all the frost and chilled status effect? And here's why. Minor Brittle. Minor Brittle increases crit damage by 10%. But how? So to apply Minor Brittle, we need to do frost damage with a Frost Staff equipped to an enemy that has the chilled status effect. I know, right? It's super confusing. So we have so much chilled status effects from our abilities, the enemy is almost always under the effect. We are also doing an obnoxious amount of frost damage, meaning that chilled enemy is always taking frost damage. And on top of that, we have Frost Staff equipped on both bars. This means that our enemy almost always has the minor brittle debuff applied. Also, while on the frost part, in update 36, the Warden got a change to the Winter's Revenge passive Piercing Cold, which now increases our damage by 2%, but increases to 12% when wielding an ice staff. With a combination of everything, we almost have every passive buff and debuff we could need happening at once. I recommend reading over all of your Warden passives, but I would like to mention a couple here. First off, staying with the Winter's Revenge, Frozen Armor gives us more physical and spell resistance for each slotted ability. In Glacial Presence, this increases the chance of applying chilled to enemies with Winter's Embrace abilities by 200%, and increases the damage of the chilled status effect. Next, moving into the Green Balance skill line, we want the Maturation passive. This gives us a buff unique to the Warden called Minor Toughness, which increases our max health by 10%, allowing us to run such a low health pool with our food. This happens whenever you activate any heal on yourself or an ally. It doesn't need to be from this skill line, so we'll be proccing this when we activate our Arctic Blast. Next, the Animal Companion line, we get Bond with Nature, which heals us anytime one of our companion skills ends, like our Shulks, Blue Betty, or even Deceptive Predator should you have used it. Also, Savage Beast, which when casting an Animal Companion ability while we're in combat generates 4 ultimate every 8 seconds. Next, Flourish, which increases Magicka and Stamina recovery if an Animal Companion ability is slotted, and Advanced Species, which increases the critical damage by 4% for each Animal Companion ability slotted. So as you can see, Wardens are just decked out with everything one could need for a solo build. Combining that with everything else, such as a Concentrated Barrier passive from the Psijic skill line that gives us a 5k shield when blocking with a Psijic ability equipped like Channeled Acceleration, we're just set. So when it comes down to it, it's all about rotation. And what I've tried to do is simplify this one, but still get the most out of it. So as normal, we'll be applying our buffs first, Channeled Acceleration, Ice Fortress, and Blue Betty. And then it's time to open. To open, we want to go Shulks, Caltrops, Meteor if you've got it, Wall, Icy Shards, Arctic Blast, and 1 Destructive Reach, and then Shulks again. After that, it's just as you see them fall off, you want to reapply them. Casting Shulks after it's popped twice, and a spam ball whenever you have nothing else to cast. It can seem a bit daunting at first, but don't stress too much about it. Like anything, once you learn it, it becomes super easy. And to be honest, Warden was always my least played class. I never much liked the playstyle of it. It felt super complicated, but after a little bit of practice, it's now super simple, and this thing feels like an absolute beast chopping down content in front of it. And thus, I give you the ultimate Frost Warden. I truly believe that this is one of the best Frost Wardens you will find, while maintaining as much Frost capabilities as possible. I've been talking here for a while, and this video is already long enough. So with that said, I will leave it there. If you have any questions, or if I've missed anything about this build, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or you can also ask me while I'm live on Twitch or Discord. Links to those will be in the description below. I will also have a temporary written guide down there as well for those of you that prefer that. That said, thank you all so much for watching. If you're liking the builds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you will know of the next one. Also, if you like this Frost Warden, don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.